Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Elseworlds Exchange. I'm Sal, and I'm joined today by Tom King. Tom, welcome to the show, man.
What a pleasure to be here. I see you every other day.
It feels like it, right?
We got so many compliments for the conversation with Mitch and Doc. I wanted to compliment you because so many people were saying, wow, what a fantastic job you did. So great job.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I actually didn't get any feedback about it whatsoever. So I was like, okay, I really fucked that one up.
No, man, people were going gaga over it. I got emails and stuff.
No,
man.
What? Thank you.
Yes, well done.
Yeah, they are. You guys are super, approachable and friendly. And man, that was my first interaction with Mitch or with Doc. And,
well, I'm sorry you had to go through that.
No, it was lovely. They were, they're awesome. And yeah, I love their art. And I never know what to talk about with artists. I feel like such a schmo because I'm like, I'll talk to our writers because I used to fancy myself once. I'd be like, oh, what is it about, the meta conversation going on in society? But like with artists, I'm like, you really draw cool pictures. That's a really cool drawing you did. What were you thinking when you drew that cool picture? They're like, I was probably watching Jeopardy, man. What do you want from me? Like I know artists and they're like, I'm not thinking anything. I'm just letting my body do the thing that you enjoy. And I'm like, oh. No.
I do feel it's like when you watch like Letterman and they're always talking to actors, but they never talk to them about acting. Like, because actors don't want to talk about that. Like,
no.
They just, because that's like, with writers, like when you ask me about a story, you're asking about my job. But like for artists, yeah, I try to engage. All my best friends are artists, and it's something I have no comprehension of. Like, my hands don't do it, my eyes don't do it. Like I'll be sitting. I remember sitting with Clay in we were literally playing Backcat, and he pointed to a picture and he said, the problem with this picture, most pictures of women, is that women's heads have to be, I can't remember if it was larger or smaller, they have to be like 10% smaller than they're supposed to be, and this artist doesn't know that trick. I was like, I just see a picture of a woman. But he sees like these little
yeah.
And Mitch, he's a master of computer art, so he's like, he'll look at anything and he'll just be like, oh yeah, he used this program and this program and this program and this program. That's how he did that. Like he sees like the matrix that I don't see. Yeah, they're just.
That's exactly what it's like. They see the code, and I just don't. Like, yeah. and it makes me feel like I don't know. Good for you, man. Could you just explain to me why it's cool? Like, because it's and they're like, I don't know. The ones who do know, they have a YouTube channel, and they just talk while they draw, and that's the way it works. But yeah. But I'm glad you had a good time. This is our third interaction. Not that I'm counting or anything, but thanks for jumping on my show for doing this.
It's the third time's the magical one. So
I think so because
nail it here.
Because the remainder of the interview will be Batman versus Predator questions.
I am in. I fucking love Batman versus Predator. Just read it. I'm prepped for this interview.
Literally, I've been looking for someone who appreciates it as much as I do, and I've been like, not that I'm really going to talk about that for an hour, but maybe we will. Who knows? Because I don't. You might. I don't know how many like comic book YouTube interviews you do, but I will give you a little bit of inside baseball on my dopey career, in that the comic book YouTube audience couldn't care less about like the insights that creators have in their work. They're like, what happened to Batman this week? I'm like, this is the guy who will tell you what Batman's going to do next year. And they're like, shut up. And I'm like, right on. So when it comes to this, at this point, I'm like, no, let's just have a fun conversation because that seems to be more in tune with what people are interested in anyway. And if we do get insight, we'll get into it,
I sympathize with this entirely because when I got back into comics, I like a lot of people, I sort of dropped out of comics when I hit high school.
Same.
And went a little in and out in college because I was an intern, so I kind of went in. And then I got back in my mid-20s, but I was not a Wednesday warrior. I was a trade waiter. So I would because it was honestly, it was a money thing because it was cheaper on Amazon because you get 10% off and they're already packaged.
That was me in college. Yeah.
It was so, but I wanted to be involved in the culture and stuff. So I personally, YouTube was good, but I was big with iFanboy. They were like mine. That was like, they were the boards I came up with. Of course. And so instead of reading comics, I listened to their show, and I wasn't interested in them interviewing a creator. I wanted them to say, okay, this is the book that came out. It was good. This is what it was about.
I'll pick
that up. This is the book that came back. It was good. It was my experience of reading the comics. And then 6 months later, I'd actually read what they had recommended. And by that time I had forgotten the details, but yeah, that's how I experienced comics. So I sympathize with people who just want to talk comics and don't want to hear deep thoughts on.
I think that is that's the majority, and it's funny because it's, you know, it seems like big publishers, comic publishers, have no marketing budget because it seems like, I mean, and I don't want to get you in trouble, so I'm not going to ask you to name names or talk about anything, but it feels like from an outsider's perspective.
The following people I don't like.
Well, the following people are cheap and don't allocate funds towards promotion because it feels like publishers go, there's a book coming out. Hey, people who made the book, would you mind tweeting about it? Like, is that all we can do to promote the book? I feel like there's more we can do here to get people to buy these damn things besides telling the creators who have a following they're already buying the book. You know, it's like, what else can we do to get these things out there? But creators are just kind of like left to their own devices. What are we going to do? I guess we'll just tell other people to buy the book, you know, tweet about it, go on podcasts. But, you know, that's the audience that's already buying the book. I don't know.
That's where we are. PR for comics is very difficult. And DC has a very good PR team, and specifically someone I work with who I utterly admire his work ethic. And I think he's really good for this industry. All right. Sorry, I'm Clark Bull, who helps me on a lot of stuff. I sing his praises to the rafters. But it's tough because the audience that buys the book consumes it entirely in a different way from the audience we want to build to buy the book.
Yes.
And so you're always torn between these two people where it's like, I mean, so, you know, I remember they'll be like, hey, dude, we got you an interview with Rolling Stone. I was like, that's great. But like, if I'm a non-comic book reader, which almost everyone who reads Rolling Stone is, and they're like, oh, yeah, that dude wrote a comic, cool. Like, and they didn't go on Amazon and buy it. That's not like, that's like me reading an ad for a radio drama in Punisher. You know, it's like, that's interesting, but I'm a Punisher fan.
Right. But I feel like the Rolling Stone thing is tough. At least getting into the right wheelhouse. At least that's like, it's tangential, it's creative, it's media, you know, it's disposable. It could have some kind of, but it's an entirely different audience. So as such, maybe, I mean, it beats preaching to the choir is what I'm saying. You know, as far as like telling your own audience, hey, don't forget to keep buying that book you have on reserve. Like, that's not enough. But you can't ignore the audience, because if you ignore those people, because they actually pay the bills. Right. It's almost like the politics. We're in such a political moment right now where each party is deciding, like, how much do I want to either get my base out or go for those people who aren't my base who might come over. It's like, it's almost the exact same dilemma. Absolutely. Well, I remember I was going to say the industry is like, I know that there is this like mentality, or at least there had been this mentality of, well, we know who's already going to buy the book. Like, we have the lifers, the people who are already like locked in. Those are the people who tell you how much they hate your work for the last 5 years because they've been buying it for the last 5 years and they're not going to stop anytime soon. You know, and it's like, those people are good. I don't have to sell to them. You know, we got to sell to the people who don't even know you exist. I don't know. It seems like it's a complicated mess of trying to market comics at this point. But I feel bad that the burden seems to fall on you guys, because it's like, well, people follow you. Like, people follow creators now more than ever. And so as such, like, the burden and responsibility seems to be on your shoulders as far as like, promote the book however you can. Go on a YouTube show, go on a podcast, tweet it. You know, but what else can you do? I don't know. I feel like there's some kind of responsibility on the publisher's part to do something.
I don't know, but I mean, when an actor in a movie comes out, they have the responsibility to go on David Letterman. They have the responsibility to do those like pressers where they get, you know, 5 minutes with each person. I mean, part of your responsibility as a creator is to use the people's interest in you as a creator to point to your new thing. Sure. And I feel like that's true in every medium. I think having started out in novels, God forbid. Yeah. Fortunate about comics is that there are people that will listen to you. Try promoting something as a novelist. Like at least in comic books, and that was one of the wonderful things I love about going to comics, was like, there was already an infrastructure for promotion where you could go on podcasts, you could go on YouTube, you knew where the ads were. With novels, that infrastructure really didn't exist.
That's interesting.
It might exist more now, but just because the audience is much broader and their interests are much broader.
Yeah.
And they don't care. Comic book people, God bless us, we care so much. So we're like, oh, I just read a comic book. Let me go watch a show about comic books.
Yeah. Novel readers are just kind of like, I read something, I absorbed it, it's done. Like, I guess you could go on Goodreads and be like, this is a really good book, I wrote it, please give me 5 stars. I don't know. Yeah, I know nothing about the publishing, like the book publishing world, outside of, actually, I had a friend who was a editor at Scholastic, so I should know a lot, but I really don't. But, yeah.
I remember my first book, One Scratch Sky. I'm gonna name names here because you could just look this up. So I was giving it out free at cons. I've told the story many times. Like I waited in line for an hour to give Scott Snyder a copy, and I was just be like, here's my book. If you want to read it and read about it, you can. If you want to throw it in the trash, whatever. Here's a copy of my book.
Exactly.
People do it to me all the time, and I think it's a wonderful way. You've produced something, get it in the hands of people who can influence other people.
Totally.
So I did that for a whole year, and one of the people I gave it to was Scott McCloud, the famous inker in New Mutants. A very nice guy whose children's book is one of my favorite children's book of all time. It's like superheroes A to Z. My kids read over and over. I highly recommend it. But so I gave it to, and I gave it for a free copy at some con. I was like, hey, just, and I bought it. And I had a policy that if I did this to you, I would buy something from you.
Totally.
Like if I'm just going up to your booths, I'm gonna be like, okay, can I have that $20 print? Here's a free book. Like just so like I wasn't,
it wasn't entirely one-sided. It's transactional.
It wasn't I took up your time. At least I can buy something from you.
Totally.
So I bought something from his table. I probably bought that book that I read my kids for the song. And I gave it to him, and it was great. And he walked. And then the first day my book come out, Goodreads, I looked, interview. First review was from Bob McLeod. I was like, oh, I gave that guy a free book, and it dumped on my book. It was like, yes, it was like I didn't know what this was. It was a piece of crap. And I was like, Bob McLeod, I gave you that book for free. You could just hate it and be quiet. You don't have to. You don't have to. It's okay if you hate it, but you got it for free from a poor creator.
That's kind of cool, though. I think I'd appreciate that in a small way. But and then I'd really cry myself to sleep. That's awesome. I hope it's still there. I like that he signed it too. It's like Bob McLeod says, no.
I was like, oh man, I love the New Mutants. How can I ever read them again?
Yeah. Oh. Apropos of our discussion earlier about our Strange Adventures panel from Baltimore Comic-Con, you had a dope-ass panel, just you and Dave Gibbons talking about everything, which was super awesome.
Nervous.
And was that your first time talking to Dave, or was that or had you met at cons and stuff?
No, Dave and I mean, I don't know, I wouldn't say we're like friends, but we know each other. At cons. He was very kind to me when Mr. Miracle was coming out. He came up to us because with the 9-panel grid, we're getting all sorts of did you rip off Watchmen, all that stuff.
Of course,
and he came up just and at the Eisners when we won some awards, he came up and just and told us how much he enjoyed the book and took Mitch and I to the side and really sort of in a very just most lovely, friendly way, which let us know that like I literally said to him, I'm sorry I stole this stuff from you, and he's like, I stole it from Steve Ditko. That's the way comics work, and it was almost like a welcome to the club kid sort of pat on the back. So I knew for that night, and I've talked to him in green rooms here and there, but we've never had a conversation for an hour, just the two of us. That was a first. So yeah, it was a little nerve-wracking.
Yeah, I whenever anything like that occurs, it's just like no matter what level of your career it is, I'm sure. He's such a lovely gentleman that you can't imagine him being, I don't know, abrasive or scary or intimidating. Once you talk to him, it's like, wow, like, oh, you're cool.
The hard part about talking to Dave Gibbons is that Watchmen was 34 years ago or something like that.
Yeah, just about 86, right?
Yeah, 86. So he's been asked every question from every angle on every panel about Watchmen, and his career has expanded 40 years. So he worked in that book for a year and a half, and so that's 38 and a half more years of his career. But there's something inside you. My generation of creators, I was kind of a late arrival to this generation, but sort of the generation that came with Bendis and Millar and Vaughn and that sort of generation. We were the fucking Alan Moore generation. We were the guys who read Alan Moore when we were kids.
Yes.
and decided that he had the keys to the kingdom, and somehow we would go in that same door.
Mm-hmm.
So to talk to the guy who did that to you as a child and who influenced everything you do, and to not constantly mention it is a genuine challenge where you're like,
absolutely,
I need to be respect, and his work he's done is incredible outside of Watchmen, but still there's that itch inside you that it's hard not to scratch it. I'm sure it's hard when anyone talks to Paul McCartney not to be like, man, just tell me some Beatles stories. He's like,
right.
That was a long time ago,
Yeah, but you know what it is. But the difference is, Dave Gibbons has had a long and just storied career. I remember when I met him, he was working on like some innovative like 3-dimensional comic book format.
Yeah, he did a lot of motion comics.
He was breaking new ground. And like not all of it made it, but it was just like Dave Gibbons, pioneered completely subverted the comic book, genre, everything, superhero genre, comic book format, is still innovating, 20, 30 years later. But Paul McCartney did the Beatles and Wings, so it's like, what else are you gonna talk to him about? Like. At some point, you got to be like, Paul, if you're going to give me a hard time about asking you about the Beatles, really, you're the asshole in this situation. I mean, like, I'm not going to ask you about Wings or a really ripping recipe for lentil soup. Like, forget it.
Mark Maron interviewed him when his latest album came out, which I loved his latest album. And Maron, this is the best question. Maron was like, "Are you doing the best work of your life now? Is this your best work?" And Paul, like, he took a pause and he said, "Well, I was in the Beatles."
Okay,
it was just a fantastic answer. I think of that sometimes, and I'm like someday Phil will be like, "Oh, did you do the best work of your life?" And I was like, "Well, I did work with Mitch Gerrits." Like it was a moment,
yeah, that's fair. That's cool though. That's a nice like real understanding of where you are and what you're doing, and that actually humanized Paul McCartney a little more for me. Thank you. So
he needed the good press. He's only worth a few billion. I think
Paul doesn't need the defense. He's fair. Yeah, that's a good point. So yeah, I will ask about Batman Predator because, like I said, I've been looking to talk about this forever with anybody. So I'll talk to Tom King.
I put my top 10 Batman stories of all time. I was thinking, I think it's in my top 10.
I think that's exactly right. So yeah, same here. It's easily one of the top 3 best Predator stories of all time.
I don't think I've read enough Predator stories to have a.
Well, I cross like movies and stuff like that too. Like it's one of my favorite Predator experiences. Because,
including the movies.
Oh, I include the movies because there's only 2 good ones.
That's good.
That being said, okay. So let's ask your opinion because it's I've got Tom King on the show. What top 5 best Predator movies? Top 3 maybe?
Top 3 Predator?
Top 3.
I don't think I can name 3. Look, the only good Predator movie is the first one. All the rest are not as good.
It's not as good, no.
But Predators.
Yeah, Predators.
That was a good one, right? Where they go to the planet with Adrian Brody.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. I like that one. That one was all right.
I agree. Cool. Yeah. No, Predator 1, Predator 2, Predators. For me, that's it. Like, because I dig Predator 2 because it doesn't try to do the exact same thing, but it still manages to expand the lore. It's like it's trying something, but it doesn't. It doesn't get too hoity-toity. It plays with it does what it's supposed to do. Plus,
as a kid, I liked Predator 2 a lot. I remember. I saw Predator in the theaters. I must have been 9 or 10 years old. I don't think I could have been older. I was not
old enough to be seeing it in theaters.
I saw both Robocop and Predator in the theaters.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
My best friend and I used to, because Predator used to come on HBO. I didn't have cable growing up, but he had cable, and we go to his house so much. It was on HBO, and we used to do a thing in the scene where the fucking wrestler who's mayor of Minnesota,
Jesse the Body Avenger.
Jesse the Body blows away the forest.
Yep.
You could stand up and say the Pledge of Allegiance. So we'd always stand, whenever we saw the scene, we stand up and be like, "I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America."
It doesn't run the entire.
Runs the entire. You can do the whole thing.
Awesome.
You get the whole thing while he takes down the forest.
I love that. Oh, that movie was just on the other day, and I was watching. I'm like, this is still good. This is still excellent. Did you know that Arnold named his dog Dutch?
No.
Yeah, he just got back from like surgery, and He was like, he's like, Dutch missed me or something like that. I'm like, you named your dog Dutch? You're the man.
John McTiernan had a run in the mid 80s that few directors have ever had, with Die Hard and Predator and Hunt for Red October.
Yes.
I mean, that's like 3 of the top 10
best action movies of all time. Yeah.
And he just was like killing them out.
Yeah. Have you? What are your thoughts on Last Action Hero? Because he made that one too.
I did not. I saw it twice in the theaters because I was big into Arnold at the time, and I did not enjoy it.
Yeah, I also did not enjoy it, but I found some appreciation for it because I recognize, like, oh, you're trying to be subversive, but like, you know, the studio clearly wouldn't let you do it because it's just like they didn't get it either, and the kid's horrible, and you know.
Yeah, I think that was the main thing. The kid was horrible. I remember that sort of dragging down the movie.
Yeah. But John McTiernan directs it, and so the action sequences, I'm like, this is like classic John McTiernan Predator type stuff, and it's like, oh, because it is John McTiernan, and it is a pretty spectacularly directed movie. It's just too bad it's done. It's very good.
At the time, I was so hungry for those like yippee-ki-yay motherfucker moments. Like that's
Totally.
all I was looking for in a movie. I was like, jokes are fine, but I want that moment where the hero gets knocked back and he's the last one and he takes it. And it didn't have that moment. And when he didn't have that moment for me at that time, I was like, no, you lost me.
That's fair. So you mentioned you saw Robocop in theaters. I assume you're also a big Robocop fan, or at least you're a fan of the Robocop movie, the first one.
I am, and I'm a fan of Frank Miller, who wrote the next few.
I know. Did you ever notice
that third one had ninjas?
The third one had ninjas and a jetpack. In the first Robocop movie, there's a bunch of sequences that look suspiciously similar to sequences from Dark Knight Returns.
Oh, really?
Like when the guy, there's a hostage situation at City Hall or whatever. Like Robocop goes through the wall and pulls the guy through the wall the exact same way Batman does. And I think they drape the governor or the whatever in the American flag. And like I was like, there are a couple of scenes I'm like, oh my God. But I think Robocop came out a year prior to Dark Knight Returns. So I don't know like if the chicken or the egg in that situation, but I just watch Robocop again. Not necessarily you, but the audience at large. Watch Robocop, number one, because awesome. Paul Verhoeven. That style of directing, I think, needs to come back. Like we need some more like kind of that grit of those squibs. Like I love Dredd, but Dredd needed those Paul Verhoeven squibs to make it just that extra. Because it's like, if you know you're making an R-rated movie, put the squibs on the people. Like don't rely on digital all the time.
Paul Verhoeven always made 2 movies at once. He made a movie you watched and loved, and when you were 13 and were just like, fuck yeah, man, someone got killed by toxic waste. There.
Yes.
And then he made a movie that when you were in college, someone showed it to you and you're like, oh my God, man, it's a commentary on the movie itself, you know?
Yeah.
Like it's like totally the opposite values than what I thought it espoused.
Right. Well, that's Starship Troopers. As a kid, I'm like, this movie's totally baller. And then I'm like, watching it again as an adult, I'm like, oh my God.
Yes.
This is a movie about fascism.
Yes.
And it's like really well done. It's just the same meta commentary as RoboCop, but like ratcheted up to 11. I'm like, and here I am being like, woo, these guys are really killing these bugs. And I'm like, oh
100%,
my God,
100%. Yeah, I know.
Genius. Anyway, but yeah, what was your first exposure to Batman versus Predator?
I think I read it as a kid, but I don't remember because it was on my shelf and it wasn't like a copy that I had rebought. It was like a copy I must have bought when I was like a kid. I came out in 92, so I would have been 13. Mm-hmm. I had it. I remember the Alien versus Predator comic starring the woman who dresses up as Predator.
Yes.
I remember loving that. I haven't read it in 20 years, but I remember loving, and I read Walt Simonson's Alien stuff, which is
so good.
I was as a child, as a baby comic book fan, I was so mainstream. Like I literally did not go out of Marvel and DC. It took me so much to drag me out of Marvel and DC.
Yes.
Except maybe like some comic, like even when the cool guys I loved at Marvel went to Image, I was like, whoa, I don't know what that's about, man. There's no Avengers. I don't know. This Wildcats. That's Thor's not in it. I'm not in it.
Wow, really? You skipped out on Image?
I skipped out. I mean, I mean, it's sad to say, but I don't. Because my good friends did not like Tim Seeley and Mitch and those guys. They went right with the Image movement. I was like, no way, man. That's I'm not riding that train. I'm all Avengers and.
Yeah.
So when I read a comic like Alien v Predator, I felt like I was reading like this indie comic. I was like, you're allowed to do this in comics? Oh my god! Which, looking back, it's like incredibly mainstream. But I thought I was being very subversive.
Oh, of course, yeah. Well, then you're realizing like, oh, they're licensed characters. Like this is a corporate thing entirely.
That's right.
But yeah, man. I that's funny to say because as a kid, I was also super mainstream. Favorite characters are Batman and Spider-Man, and I was just like when they, when they did the whole DC Marvel crossover, when they made that DeMatteis Batman and Spider-Man crossover, I'm like, can you just do this all the time? Because that's all I want is just my two favorite characters, who are also the most marketable characters that you've ever found, all in the same book. I still hold to that, by the way. I'm like, if you made a 12-issue mini, you'd clean up, forget about it. It's just two fails put together. But
it seems doable.
I feel like, yeah.
The head of Marvel and the head of DC are the former business partners. Seems like they could talk to each other.
Yeah, come on, guys. I pitched this a while back. Actually, I'm going to ask you because I'll just throw it out there. Why not? My pitch was, because it feels like, we're in a weird place where companies... I mean, we're in a weird place that is in no way weird because companies are behaving like companies, which is like frustrating. But companies... DC and Marvel used to look at each other as colleagues for a long time, and like maybe competitors from like a perspective of like with let the number crunchers worry about that, but like the editors in chief, the publishers, they like lived next to each other, like they were friends, they had lunch together. It was very copacetic. And then at some point or another, like probably around major studio acquisitions, they were like, wait, no, we are competitors. And it's like, dude, no, if one of you goes under, the other goes under. And it's like, we need to shake off this concept of like competition, if one does well, we don't, like, no. Everyone, a rising tide, ladies and gentlemen. But if you need to save face by okaying a Marvel DC crossover, then use an intermediary. Like call IDW, a company you both work with, and let them publish the book. And then just take the profits. Publish the book, take 70%. IDW would be happy to take that and be the #1 selling book of the month every month. I feel like that's the way to fix it, but I don't know. It just seems like they all want to save face.
I'm not sure I buy your premise of the halcyon days of comic book use.
Really?
I think I mean you go back and when DC was publishing Marvel and wouldn't let them have more than 8 books out at a time, and like the famous meeting where Infantino screamed at the DC staff because Marvel was outselling them because they weren't, and said, why, like, these books look shitty, why are the shitty books? Get your artist to draw shit. Like
yeah,
I and even like you look back at like the first crossover with
Superman Spider-Man,
that's Jerry Conway and Ross Andrew.
Yeah.
And they had a huge fight over who would be bigger on the cover, right? Like that. You go back and then like they've designed the cover 6 times and so that's why it's such a, if you look at that cover, it's such a weird perspective in this, because they both had to be exactly the same size and one couldn't be higher than the other. So I feel that the companies have always been growly at each other.
Yeah, no, I think because I've heard that too. I mean, we've all heard the story about like Stan, hearing about what's going on the other side, where they're like, oh, they have a lot of words on their covers, so I pulled all the words, or they use a lot of green on their cover, so I pulled all the green. That seems more prankish than it seems nefarious. Of course, it is from Stan's perspective, which has its own color to it. So I can imagine it not necessarily being true more than it is entertaining. But I don't know. I feel like, look at the DC Marvel crossover of the 90s and how that happened, I guess, based on desperation more than anything else. I mean, but at the same time, the publishers at the time, or the presidents of DC and Marvel, were both neighbors. Like, they lived directly next door to each other in the same apartment complex. And like, hung out all the time. So it made sense for them to get together. I don't know. It seems like a no-brainer, but I understand that synergistically, corporately speaking, it doesn't make sense. Like collaboration isn't exactly a corporate strategy.
It's, you know what, a corporate strategy is always to make money, and there's money in them their hills, so someone will do it eventually.
I hear you.
That's the dollar will always triumph.
That's fair. I want to believe you because I because I want to see that again. I just believe in collaboration and you know, just this. I don't know. I don't see DC and Marvel as bitter rivals, but I'm a fan, so I guess you know. But you guys, you know, like, well, creators will switch sides without, you know, any real animosity. It seems like everything is cool.
See, I don't think that's right, man. I mean, behind the scenes, I think there's a lot of animosity. I know people who've been blackballed for going to Marvel. And
really?
Blackballed. Oh yeah,
because it feels like that's just the nature of the beast. It's like, if I want to negotiate a higher page rate, or if I want to, you know, get more creative freedom, and I'm being offered a better deal over here, you got to counter, or you got to understand that's just the way of the beast, right? Like.
Yeah, no, dude. I mean, you'd think so. Yeah, I always approach this like, because I've been in contract negotiations a few times where I've had the God fortune of both companies wanting me,
right? And
both times there was genuine animosity, being like, why are you even thinking of going to the other side? Or something. I was like, well, you know, have you ever watched basketball before? This is how the game is played.
Exactly.
That's like, you don't hate the player in the Dodgers for seeing if the Angels can pay more. You just that's what it. So but in there, both companies take it very personally. There's a lot of because I mean there's just the two of them, and they publish differently, and they have different philosophies, and they both blame and you know, the comic market is so fragile, so they both blame the other one for the fragility of the market. Oh, if DC didn't do this, we would be perfect. Oh, if Marvel didn't do this, we would be perfect.
They're that unrealistic about the market because that's frustrating to hear. Because, you know, it is, you know, it's like trying to solve education in America, where it's like, I say that because I used to be an educator, but like, I say that because every time that anybody wants to start a conversation about changing any major piece of infrastructure, everybody has the black and white, 100% one magic solution for everything. And just as the case with anything, it's a multifaceted, complicated mess of, you know, collaboration and it's just about cooler heads prevailing and understanding the breadth of the situation. I'm surprised to hear that, like, any company that's been working in business for almost 100 years is unrealistic about the fact that, like, it's not just because somebody put out an event at the same time your event came out, or, you know, a 12-issue miniseries came out around the same time that you were putting out some new initiative with a space book. You know, it doesn't make any sense. It's multifaceted. It's a larger, complicated mess. They should be more realistic about that.
You know, asking people who do comics for a living to be realistic is always tough, I think, maybe.
Well, you're in a dream factory, so I get the idea of of being less.
But I mean, they both. I mean, Marvel and DC have fundamentally different approaches to, and I have always had different approaches, and it's almost like cooked into their DNA.
Yeah.
Although Marvel's approach has always been, we're going to pay our creators a little less. We want the young, hungry guys.
Yes.
And they can make their money. They make their name here, make their money somewhere else. DC's approach has always been, we want the best guys.
Okay.
And we're willing to pay for the best. So DC pays more, but you know, it's the difference between. I mean, it's the difference between the Dodgers and the Rays, man. They're on TV right now, right? Like, the Dodgers bought a whole team and they got the best they could get, and the Rays just got young, quick guys who could do, you know, like. Yeah. And so it's just, they're two fundamental philosophies that are, and they create different comics. So in DC, you get a lot, you get higher heights in DC. I've always said that. Like, I think overall, I grew up a Marvel zombie. I think overall Marvel throughout, if you compared their histories, put out a better product on average.
Yes.
They're better. Marvel has better comics than DC. But DC has reached heights that Marvel never has.
Absolutely.
In terms of Watchmen, in terms of All-Star Superman, in terms of New Frontier.
Just the Vertigo imprint alone, Marvel is nothing like that. You know, you could say Marvel
Sandman,
Max and stuff like that, but it's just not that.
Like DC can be like, here's 12 literary comics that can be read by the editor-in-chief of the New Yorker and by your 13-year-old son.
Right.
And Marvel doesn't have that.
Yeah.
And that's a reflection of their approaches. If you get seasoned, great veterans, and I mean, it literally started with Frank Miller, right? Frank Miller was at Marvel. He's like, I have something called Ronin.
Yep.
And he was the first guy who's like, highest bidder can buy it.
Yeah.
And DC's like, we'll be the highest bidder.
Yeah.
and so that was the beginning of that.
Yeah. That's fair. Yeah. I never really considered the fact that their strategies were that diametrically opposed, because I feel like, you know, they make a similar product, but you're right. The imprint line, and of course, like, you know, like who pays more and what has a better product. But it's very interesting that how they beget each other. You know, they do one thing over here, another thing reflects it. I'm surprised to see that Marvel hasn't tried any of the stuff that DC pulls. Like, I'm surprised by the lack of imprints, by the lack of minis. Or they have minis, but they're more inadvertent minis, you know, where they're like, well, you've reached issue 12, it's time to stop. You're canceled.
Well, I mean, I've always felt that I'm a Marvel writer who's stuck at DC with a DC aesthetic. Because I've always felt like that's having raised in that sort of house of ideas, and
yeah.
And as a writer, you know, interning under Chris Claremont being a big influence on me as a young writer, I've always felt that just because Marvel characters are very human, that's their sort of thing, and DC characters, I mean, the most oversimplification of
it totally is, but it makes your point.
So I've always felt that I don't know. I've said this before, so
no, it bears repeating, because it's like it demonstrates your point, and I think it helps to create a common language for the audience to be like, this is the point we're trying to articulate here.
But it is funny that if you have a conversation with Marvel editor, you'll eventually get to, man, if I had those DC characters, I could fix them.
Right.
and DC editors will be like, man, if I had those Marvel characters, I could fix them like that.
Yeah.
So I agree. The grass is always greener in the other.
Oh, sure. Yeah. That's funny, because because part of the fun of my job is that I get to pretend to be a comic editor. Like, I get to just editorialize without having to spend any money or anything. And people still listen. You know, they're like, wow, like, how would you fix Young Justice? I'm like, oh, well, here's how you fix the Young Justice. Or any other team. Here's how you could create a really baller West Coast Avengers book. And people are like, yes, but I would never oversimplify to the point of thinking like, yeah, if only Marvel characters could go over to DC or vice versa. Like, the characters are so fundamentally connected to their universes and to their own intricate, like, aesthetic. Like, for example, one of the conversation we never have is like, what if Disney bought Batman? Just Batman. So you can keep all the others. We just want Batman.
I don't think they're going to sell.
Oh, no. I'm just saying. But like, well, but if there was, I remember there was discussion about, you know, acquisition of certain companies, breaking up the whole thing, and if the characters were in flux or in question. But if Disney just bought Batman, how you wouldn't get the same gravitas of the character interactions that you get at DC. Like, the fundamental connection between Superman and Batman, and how they come from two different publishing houses, essentially, but in their longevity, their proximity, and what they represent to each other and to the universe that they come from, ultimately, when they were brought into one universe, it's something that you can't recapture or replicate in another publishing house. Like, you can't just do that. You can't just take this character and drop him over here and assume it's going to work.
Well, I mean, there's an easy example in the fact that Captain Marvel was the most popular superhero in the 40s.
Yep.
Well, far and away more popular than Superman and Batman. Sold literally 50% more.
Yeah.
And then through, you know, DC, because they're a bunch of wonderful cheats, They sued and got him taken away, and eventually stole him basically.
Yeah,
through the legal system, and brought him into DC, and he's now their 50th most popular character. Like, he never achieved those heights again that he had at Fawcett.
that's right.
Taking that sort of they never putting him in the DC universe never made as much sense as him being in sort of the crazy Fawcett universe in terms of appealing to that mass audience.
Definitely. Well, and of course the fact that, objectively speaking, Captain Marvel was a ripoff of Superman, and having a ripoff of, I mean, in the most objective, superficial of analyses, I think, like, it's like, oh, we got to get another strongman in a cape. This one's magic, and I got a bunch of chicanery going on with that. But like, having a Superman allegory in a universe where Superman exists is never going to work for you. Like, he's always going to be in the shadow of Superman.
That's true. Yeah. I mean, Captain America was a ripoff of the Shield. Everything
right.
was a ripoff of
yeah, that's true. Yeah, but there's a difference between Superman and everybody else, right? Because like, Superman is the archetype. He's the original. He's the first. Like, there's something about Superman that you could rip off Wolverine. You could do like 17 Wolverines. You missed out on Image, but let me tell you, there were about 6 or 7 Wolverines running around in Image in the early days, and none of them sold, but like, they ended up on plenty of Wizard covers over the years. But
hey, I wrote a book called Once Crowd Sky. I had a character, but the only thing, my favorite part about it is there's a Superman allegory, and his name is Ultimate, and he has a sidekick named Penn Ultimate. I always thought that was clever. So I've sold Superman in my time too.
Oh, sure. Well, because A, you can, and B, you can talk about Superman or talk about the themes associated with the character without, you can do shorthand. The only time it doesn't work for me is when you're watching Man of Steel and young Clark Kent puts on the Superman cape, he puts his hand on his shoulders, and I'm like, who are you emulating? What reference is he making?
He's that good, man. He's got super sight.
Yeah, he's got meta sight.
He's got meta sight. That's another power.
Yeah.
And after shooting little Superman out of his fingers, he got meta sight.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, but as far as Batman vs. Predator goes,
we got way distracted from Batman vs. Predator. It's dissecting all of Marvel and DC.
Exactly. But as far as Batman vs. Predator goes, do you think that Marvel's going to stick the landing with this Alien Predator acquisition, or do you think it's going to just go the way of Captain Marvel at DC?
I mean, yeah, it all depends on the creative teams.
I'm going to put you on the spot about that. I'm sorry. This is all new stuff, and maybe one day you'll work over there, and like you said, people take it personally, and I don't want to put you in a position.
No. Look, I worked for Marvel. I worked for brilliant editors. I think the teams they have at Marvel are great people. I think it's a fantastic company, and they made my career. My career would be nothing without vision. And I think if you put the right team on that, you put a Donny Cates on that, you put a Jason Aaron on that, and you make it scary and I think they can do it. They got to make it dirty. I mean, that's always the problem with comics. It's hard to make because Alien vs. Predator, that Dark Horse aesthetic of like scratchy and yucky. And
yes,
it's not Disney related, but if they can do that, they can do it. I think. I mean. So, I mean, I loved Aaron's Conan. Which I
it's
thought
excellent.
Was really good. So, I'm sure they can do it.
Yeah, Marvel's handling of Conan, not only did it completely come out of left fields, because, you got Aaron's Conan, then you got Zub's Conan, then you got Duggan's Conan, and then you got the 2 or 3 Conan events that came out savage. There was the Serpent Crown, there was the Dark Avenger, Savage Avengers. A lot of Conan out of nowhere, and you got a different Conan for everybody, but it's still the same Conan. Oh, he showed up in that other, the No Surrender book. But they managed to keep the spirit of Conan pretty consistent and keep the grit. So I think you're right. I'm really worried about like Whale and Yutani being a competitor for Stark International, and like, I don't know about you, because I think about this a lot more than you do, because you have a family, and but
just because they acquire the rights to something doesn't mean they're going to shove it into the universe.
I hope they don't, but I know they will.
Like Marvel Man isn't flying around now.
No, yeah, but I don't know, and I don't know why that is. By the way, where's the Marvel Man Tom King 12-issue mini? That's That
like I don't have enough trouble with doing Rorschach.
That's true. Yeah, but I mean, your Rorschach book came at the right time because they'd already done before. The heat all came from before Watchmen. Everybody's like, how dare they? And and you got Darwin Cook doing a Minutemen book, and it's like, how could you complain about having the Kuberts all work together? You got Joe and Andy working together on a Night Owl book. Like, come on. And it's like, yeah, those are great pieces of art, but like, but critically speaking, ugh. But you had the Before Watchmen, and then you had the Doomsday Clocks. So by the time Rorschach comes out, it's like, oh yeah, fuck it. Like, that was literally my approach, was like people being like, aren't you outraged that Tom King's doing a Rorschach book? And I'm like, I don't think you can get any more outrageous than Brian Azzarello's Rorschach book.
I was a little outraged myself when they offered it to me, but I think it worked out.
Did they offer it to you, or were you like, I got a Rorschach book?
Oh, no, they offered it to me. Yeah, I said no. I said, hell no. I said, please, no, never. I have no desire at all to do that. That sounds like a terrible idea. They wanted me and Mitch to do it as our follow-up to Mr. Miracle, because Lord knows Rorschach would sell more than Adam Strange, But the publisher was smart about that. I mean, Adam Strange sells well, but Rorschach sells better.
Right.
But, I had no desire to ever sort of
go into the universe
to be compared to Alan. I mean, Lord knows I've lived in Alan Moore's shadow, and I used to say Omega Men should be called Who Omega's the Omega Men. And to enter into that sort of shadow, and to try to because he has such a distinct voice for Rorschach, and every time people try to, and it's funny because he stole the voice from Taxi Driver, right? Like,
right, yeah.
But he somehow captured it in a way that other people, it's very hard to capture. And I knew I couldn't do it. I wasn't going to be the one to do it. So I was like, no, that's just not something I can do. So that was a smart decision. I changed my mind and said yes.
Now, was it that literally you were just like, no? Oh, that'd be really cool. Okay, yeah.
I mean, I've said this before, so I'm sorry if people have heard, but
I haven't heard it, so I'm happy to be surprised.
I know the Watchmen TV show came out, and that to me was eye-opening in terms of like I watched. I wanted to hate it so much. I wanted to sort of fanboy and be like, "This isn't Watchmen. You don't know what you're doing." And I just ended up loving it and loving it more each episode. Where I was just like, "Whoa!" And then I was like, "Oh, this is." It's not trying to copy Watchmen. It's just trying to speak the same language that Watchmen does.
Gotcha.
Which to me is a different sort of element, which I hadn't even comprehended. I hadn't even thought about it. I thought if I did Watchmen, I'd do 9-panel grids and I'd do the same voice as Rorschach. And I'm watching this and I was like, oh, you can speak in that. So that sort of got buzzing me that it was possible. And then at the almost simultaneously, I did a book with Jorge Fornes. I did Batman Annual 4, which I think is one of my best Batman issues I wrote the whole time. I cannot tell you how much I love that issue.
I have no argument with that.
and I'd worked with Jorge before, and when I saw his art for that issue, I was like, oh, he's a genius. Like I'm sitting on, there's a few times in my career, like when I first started working in clay, I was like, oh, this guy is a genius.
Yeah.
Or when I got and when that revelation happens to you, where you're like, it's kind of like. As a collector, it's like when you're digging through a long box and you see a $100 issue for $2. You're like, you're looking around. You're like,
am I on camera? Yeah.
Am I on camera? Yeah. So and I was like, I can do, and DC at the time, their management has changed since then.
Yeah.
Was not hot on Jorge for stupid reasons, and so I knew I had to find a project that was worthy of his art, and that could, and I was like, oh, DC really wants me to do this Rorschach book. That's worthy of his, and I knew he'd do a fantastic job on it. And I knew if I put pressure on DC, they'd let him do this book. I was like, he told me I'll only do it if you give me Jorge. And they're like, all right, here's Jorge.
We don't get it, but okay.
Yeah, and he was going to Daredevil, so Marvel was pulled again. Marvel versus DC. So he was getting pulled one direction. So it was that kismet of the Watchmen TV series, and just really wanting to work with Jorge on something big and balletic and ambitious.
Man. Fornes on Daredevil.
He was on it for a few issues. He did an arc with Chip, and it's really
that's beautiful. Right. Yeah. But I'm really glad we got Chichetto on Daredevil. I love what Fornes is. That Rorschach book looks so good, and I got to tell you, Fornes did the cover, right?
Yeah.
Like the thumb. Now, did Fornes do the design? Because the design element of the cover is so good. Like the
No,
thumbprint and
the design was done in house. Darren, I forget what Darren's last name is, but he's the new DC hired a new designer about a year ago, and he's killing it.
Now,
he's redoing.
Is Darren doing Future State as well? Like in terms of the design element, because like the Future State initiative looks real pretty. Like
I assume so. I don't know. I know he's doing the design. All my books now have this special. I have these 3 books: Rorschach, Straight Adventures, and Backhand. And they all have this similar design aesthetic where they have a back and a front that talk to each other, and they have pages inside their design pages. He's doing all of that stuff.
That's awesome.
Killing it. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's gorgeous. And the spot UV is on point. My wife is a designer, and she's just like, "Have you seen?" Yeah, that's it. That's the one. Mine's at the office, but otherwise I'm at home right now. But
all this stuff, all that beautiful stuff.
Yeah,
all this page, which will eventually become important to the comic book.
Oh, that's I love the 70s look to it. Like, it's pretty. Anyway, but yeah. Well, I'm glad that you said that you ultimately changed your mind, because that's the thing is that at this point, because literally people have been asking me, and I'm sure if they've asked me, they've asked you 1,000 times, where it's just like, don't you think that, it's time to leave Alan Moore alone and stop doing this stuff with Watchmen and stuff like that? And I'm like, after Doomsday Clock, who gives a shit at this point? Just do whatever you want to do. Like, not that I'm ragging on Doomsday Clock. I'm just saying, like, you did this huge thing. Like, this thing comes out, and it's just this big thing that's trying to say something about both books, and and the world didn't end, and the seas didn't boil over. It's like, we're fine. And listen, there's thousands of dollar bins full of before Watchmen books, like, and Watchmen's still celebrated, and it's still a success, and it's still subversive, and it's still great. Like, it doesn't change anything.
I have the same shitty contract on Sheriff of Babylon that they have on Watchmen. I signed it early in my career. The contract where if people keep buying the book, you can't
have it.
You can't have it back. So anytime someone's like, "Hey, we did a Sheriff of Babylon book club," I'm like, "Oh, God damn it, stop reading that book!" No, because it's such an easy TV show. It's a crime series set in Iraq. So
shocking that it wouldn't be a show, but
I do sympathize, but incredibly. But I mean, there's a lot of mitigating factors to it. To me,
sure.
I probably do. But I mean, on the big level, on interviewing Dave Gibbons, nothing I do is going to get Dave Gibbons back the rights.
Right.
AT&T is not going to be like, "Oh, Tom turned down Rorschach, give Gibbons his rights back."
Yeah,
like, that's not a step. But if I do a book Rorschach that's really, really good, they're going to sell a lot of Rorschachs, but they're going to sell more Watchmen copies, and Dave Gibbons is going to get more money.
Yeah.
So like, so I don't know. In my head, Dave gets, and if this book's like, I remember I went up. This is a lesson I learned very early in my career. I did a crossover in Grayson. I don't remember what it was called, but it was with the Owls, with Scott's the Court of Owls.
Yeah.
And we were doing a lot of sort of retconning to them and adding history and stuff. And I was at a convention. It was the very beginning of my career, and Scott was there. And I said, "Hey, let me run some Nevada. Let me run some Scott. Let me run some Court of Owls stuff by you." And Scott's like, "Look, buddy, if it's good, it's good. And if it's bad, nobody will care."
Yeah, that's true. Like, they'll just forget. Or they'll change it.
It's not gonna affect, like, what is good is continuity. If you do something shitty, so you'll either add to my legacy or you'll be forgotten. Good luck.
Right.
So I was like, "Oh, that's a good attitude." So.
Yeah, thank you. That's nice, and yeah, that's cool. So, with respect to Batman vs. Predator,
I love this framing device.
I really do too. I'm like really excited about how well it's going, because we're almost done.
We have gone all the way through the world.
Yeah. Have you read the sequels to it? Because it is such a masterpiece, a master class, if you will, in not only licensing, but also in crossovers, in a Batman story, in world building. Like, it works so well. Have you read the sequels to Batman Predator?
No, I have not. I really don't. That's good to know.
They're quite terrible. There has never been one that held a candle to the first one, and that's what's so frustrating. Is that it's such a basic premise, because like, the fact that there had been until the acquisition, there had never been a Predator show, like an HBO show or a Showtime show, cinema. It doesn't matter. Whatever non-network company licensed Predator, how there couldn't be like a Mandalorian-esque show where it's like each episode is a different era, different genre, because I've said this 1,000 times. I'll say it again because why not? But like for me, the Predator format it's an action movie, or it's any story. It's like it's a C-level story, and then around the beginning of Act 2, a Predator shows up, and now it's that. So it's like a Die Hard movie, where like no Die Hard movie except for the last one was written to be a Die Hard movie. They're all different movies. That then they went, the script isn't really good enough, and then they go, throw John McClane in there. Now it's a Die Hard movie. Like literally Die Hard 2, 3, 4, they're all different movies. And then they just went, if we put John McClane in it, now it's a Die Hard movie. And then it's like, it's great because it's just about Bruce Willis's charisma. Later on, it's the lack thereof. But in the early days, it's really quite compelling. But with Predator, same thing. It's just like, take any middling script where characters are going someplace and doing something, and then a Predator shows up and throws a monkey wrench into it. Because the Predator is just a movie about like Costa Rican, Nicaraguan, whatever, South American guerrillas moving weapons that are funneled by the Russians into America. It's okay. And what's going to happen? Arnold kills all the guys. Right. But then the Predator shows up. And now it's a cool movie. Like, now it's not boring. Predator 2, same deal. There's a drug war. And you know what it is. Like, Danny Glover is too old for this shit. Predator, though. Movie. That's everything. Batman versus Predator. There's a mob war. They're using boxers. Predator. Now it's a movie. Like, it's brilliant. It's brilliant, and I would never have guessed that Dave Gibbons got it. Right? Like, because and not because he's not great, but more because he's too great. Like, he's too highbrow for us Predator fans to be like, no, I get it. Yeah. Like, and adds to the mythology, but without like, and knows what's cool, but keeps it grounded in the Batman world. Like, did you? Oh, go ahead.
What makes me a good Predator story is it's a fight for the alpha, right? It's like who is the number one, and right. that's what Predator is. I mean, that's and that's what it's about. That's the first Predator movie. It's like, man, all these guys are cool. Each one is cooler than the next one.
Each one can have their own movie.
Holy shit, he killed that guy. He killed that guy. He must be the best of all time. It's almost like a boxing movie.
Yeah.
And then it's like, no, Arnold's like, no, I'm the best of all time. Right? Like, it's almost like there are brackets and just like they're working their way up. And I think that's what Dave was saying, because it's like Predator comes to Gotham. Who's the best? You're a criminal. You're the best. Oh, wait, Batman's the best. And it's like, and again, it's just that same until you get the cage match between them.
Yeah.
And I can see how a sequel will be back, because how many times can you do that same plot?
Well, they don't. They don't even bother. See, the problem is Gibbons is giving you a Predator movie with Batman in it.
Yeah.
And the other ones are Batman stories with Predators in them.
Yeah,
that's not the same thing.
That's not the same thing.
Now, here's a question, because I've read your Batman run, but I don't remember it all because I only read it when it came out.
How dare you?
I know. And
should have committed it to memory.
But like you did a story with Elmer Fudd in it, so I have to assume maybe you might have used some of the mobsters / boxers that come up in Batman Predator in your Batman run. Did you, and do you regret not doing it?
I do regret not doing it. I never got to do, like, my Batman run is very superhero Batman. I never did. And Batcat, which is why I like it so much, it's not superhero Batman.
This is the upcoming
one, yeah. I don't know. I couldn't tell you exactly why it turned out that way. But I never did sort of, except for an issue here and there, sort of dark, noir-y, solving a mystery Batman. And it's funny because that's how Mr. Miracle started. Mr. Miracle was supposed to be Mitch and I, because I would realize that like halfway into my run, and I think it was because I was reacting. I mean, I had Mikkel. Mikkel's not a dark and gritty artist for me, and neither is Dave Finch. Those are my two first artists I started off with. Those aren't guys that you see doing, those aren't John Paul Leon. Those aren't Mitch Gerrits, or Jorge Fornes. You give those guys the big superheroes with big muscles punching other big superheroes.
Yes.
So I was letting the art sort of lead it in that direction, I think. and Mitch and I was like, Mitch, I want to do one of those gritty year one noir Batman stories. And I had already had this idea for the War of Jokes and Riddles. And so Mitch and I are going to do that as like, The Wire, but with Batman.
Yeah.
And DC came in and they're like, we love that idea, but we love it so much we want it in the main book, and we want Mikkel to draw it because Mitch isn't good enough to draw the main book, and that's how Mr. Miracle started. We just needed another book.
Yeah.
But yeah, I never until Batcat got to scratch that sort of noir-y crime, that sort of Tim Sale, Jeff Loeb, here are the crime families.
Yeah.
I'm sad I didn't get to do that, but
yeah,
maybe someday.
I feel like there's opportunity there. I mean, but
what, DC putting out more Batman books? No, I think they're done.
There's a glass ceiling when it comes to Batman books from DC. I think you're right. Yeah, I can imagine if you were to come in, hey, I'm thinking about doing a separate Batman series, another one. They'd be like, nah, we got enough Batman.
Yeah, how relieved they'd be if Mitch and I weren't just pitching like, hey, we want to do the
Adam Strange
Brother Power the Geek next. They're like, what? Oh!
Yeah, I got a great come on D pitch.
Yeah, we want to do Batman. Yes, please come in, do Batman. Do something we can put 30 covers on.
Yes. Well, with 3 Jokers over, they got to have something to scratch that extra itch. Because let me tell you something. When Dark Knight 3: The Master Race came out, I remember that was the time when DC was like had the top 10 spots and 8 of them were Batman books. And I can imagine that was a good time to work working at DC, where they were just like, we're on top of the world. I'm like, yeah, you got 8 Batman books coming out, man.
I mean, Liefeld has said this on Twitter many times that DC is sort of like this Batman company and that the other book. And, but
I don't agree with that. But...
Yeah, I don't agree. I mean, as having written some New York Times bestsellers that don't have Batman in it, I don't agree either. But,
yeah.
But I mean, having written a lot of Batman, yeah, I mean, there's something special about that character.
Yeah.
And he touches a spark. And it's funny because it wasn't always there. Superman outsold Batman until the mid '80s.
Yeah.
And
Frank Miller.
Until Frank Miller, yeah. They don't give him. I mean, Frank gets credit for everything. Hey, Frank's in Rorschach. I don't know if you know.
Yes, I saw that. I saw the name drop. There are a couple of name drops in there. You like to do that. I saw that there's a sequence in it must have been Mr. Miracle where like everyone is in that big crowd scene where like everyone gets a panel.
Oh yeah,
like just different groups.
Yeah. Mitch and I appear and we in the last issue of Sheriff we're in the background, and so I put us in the background of the last issue of Mr. Miracle. Yeah, and maybe last issue of Strange Adventures you'll see us. Although Doc already put us in the background. I'm a bartender at Green Lantern's bar. Whatever that's.
Oh, that's awesome! Yes, that's issue 4. I don't remember. Yeah, it's really. By the way, just as a quick thing, I know like if you haven't already watched it, but Tom and I talked about Strange Adventures, kinda with Mitch with Mitch and Doc, but. Strange Adventures is such a good book, and it's such a masterclass in storytelling, in world building, and let me tell you, man, like it's just a triumph. You should be very proud.
This is the best YouTube ever. I'm enjoying this.
Well, it's rare, you can tweet at people, I mean, or you'll call me a nerd, which occasionally will occur. But hey, man, your book is so good, nerd. Fair enough. Yeah, got me. But I noticed that's like a term of endearment. This is actually a phenomenon, by the way. I've seen it a couple of times where if you compliment Tom King on Twitter and really like cite something specifically, he'll call you a nerd.
Yeah, that's my. I don't know what to say to people who say nice things about me. I was raised by Midwesterners, and I think we're just, those Midwesterners as a people, like we just don't like compliments. I think it like risks the gods. So,
right? Yeah. No, don't bring the rain won't come.
Yeah, the rain won't come. Like winter has to end at some point. We have to be nice to each other.
Yeah, we're stuck here.
That's
amazing. So I don't know. I want to kind of wrap up, I guess, because I feel like I don't want to take up too much more of your time. But it sucks that we can't have another Batman versus Predator written by Tom King now. That's the biggest.
Oh yeah,
that's the biggest disappointment.
We'll do Wolverine versus Predator.
I mean, that's like that'll sell like a Batman versus Predator would. Are you kidding me? Like, dude who made a metal, does adamantium get melted by acid blood? I don't know. We'll find out though. No question about that.
It was so my old 92 copy of that book. If you look in the, why did I have it back here? Oh my! I got a example. I look at these books. Where's my freaking copy? Oh,
you had a nice like shrine set up from the other day.
I did. Oh, I took them all out because I reread them all because I was interviewing the guy.
Yeah, exactly.
There's Kingsman. Ah, there it is. My old 92 copy.
Nice.
So old, like there's the old logo on it as a bullet still.
Yeah.
But if you look in the back, it has all the covers, the cover art. And it's by, and you look at who these, you try to guess who they are, because it doesn't, God forbid it would tell you who they are. But
no, you got to look for the signatures.
Yeah, you have to look for the signatures. But, but it's like, the highlights of who was good in 92. And it's like, who's
Arthur
left
Adams.
over. Yeah, Art Adams, Mike Mignola. It's like, oh, man, these guys, such geniuses,
Yeah.
And then you had Kaluta, it's like, oh, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, look how crazy. This is.
I know that. Oh,
and look at this wraparound cover.
That wraparound cover itself is dope. Yeah, I never got the trade.
Cover.
Yeah, I got it in floppies, and then again in Prestige. Every time I go to every time I'm at a convention, which of course hasn't been an entire year, which crushes me. But I'm not an idiot. So,
yes, that's the problem.
But every time I go, I'm like, I find another copy or another 3 copies, and I'm like, all right, they're $1. What am I? So I have like 7 copies of the whole thing.
Andy Kubert did it. Oh, and I work with Andy, and he's the nicest guy in the world. And I could not have enjoyed working with him more. God.
Yeah, man. Oh no, I know. That's Superman Up in the Sky, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah. Buy that book. Such a triumph. It's a masterclass. I hope you do another Superman mini because that thing was just so good.
Andy does everything I dislike about art. He breaks all the, I like things that are in boxes. Yes. I like one box after another. I like a lot of panel. Andy will, everything is bleeding into something. I'll him a 3-panel page. He'll shrink down 2 panels, turn it into a splash page. But because he's a genius, I mean, it's both in him genetically and the fact that since he was 2 years old, trained by his father.
Yeah,
he can do things with storytelling that are almost beyond my understanding. Where I'm like, yes, break every rule I like because you're telling the story perfectly.
Yeah, whatever you want to do, man. That's part of the reason why I enjoyed. I have my Dark Knight 3, the Master Race Andy Kubert Batman statue. I was like, this is just because Andy Kubert's Batman. How could I not buy that? When I was younger, I picked up this Batman Predator poster, which which is a fold out from one of the issues.
It's amazing,
and I got it signed by Andy and Dave Gibbons.
You are a nerd. See, that's what my Twitter nerd is reserved for.
This is up in my office, like next to my college diploma. Which, by the way, I was like, when I saw a poster, I'm like, yes. Oh, it's a fold-out poster from the issue, so it's only the size of a comic book cover, but had to have it framed. But yeah,
still badass. Man.
But it's Andy Kubert. That's an Andy Kubert poster. I got it. If I ever am in a position, because you're a collector of original art.
I have Andy Kubert. That big wall of art you're seeing. That is all Andy Kubert art. That's one issue of my Up in the Sky. All 12 pages.
That's awesome.
The boxing issue. That's right back there.
Oh, that's Mito.
Yeah, that's Mito. Yeah. who is a real character taking.
I know. Yeah. Is that's Superman's like illegitimate brother, basically?
Yeah, it's like something like from I think it's like Action 2 something. The early.
I wouldn't know the number, but yeah. Well, when we covered Up in the Sky, I went into Mito where I'm like, so the Kents actually were no strangers to adopting orphaned aliens, and for some reason King remembered that and put him in the freaking book. But yeah, man, Kubert's great. I feel like I was blessed with kind of like tangential, I was near greatness for my entire life. Like I grew up a couple miles away from the Kubert school, so I could just go.
Oh, really? Oh, that's awesome.
To like Comic Mecca and be like, I think I've met Joe Kubert. When I did one of my first comic projects, I worked. I didn't know about I knew about the internet, but I didn't know about like forums and art collaborations and stuff. So I just called the Joe Kubert School and was like, any of your students want to work on a book? And they're like, yes, here's a list. And so I worked with one student of theirs and we got like a book done, and Joe was really sweet and like emailed me back and forth about like, how's it coming? Like, let me see some art. And I'm like, yeah. And the Joe Kubert experience, there's that. And then there's one time at Baltimore Comic-Con of all places, he and John Romita Sr. are sitting together, and they went, hey, and I think the Hero Initiative or some charitable organization worked with them, and they were like, could you guys do like a jam piece? And so they drew this like full page image, and they were like, and of course it's Joe Kubert and it's John Romita. So like the ideas from the audience were like Spider-Man and Sergeant Rock or whatever, and he's like, I want to do Hawkman, and Romita was like, and I want to do Daredevil. And so it's this jam piece of Daredevil and Hawkman from Joe and John, and I'm like, and I watched them draw it live. I don't know where that piece is, but whoever has it, let me know, because I'd like to see it again. Because I've Googled it, but it's like, yeah, you don't, because I fell in and out of comics my entire life. As a kid, I loved them. As a teenager, I pretended like I didn't. Girls,
I know that.
So, yeah, and then and then like got back into it, and then actual girls like came, and I found them anyway. But it was, as it turns out, if you be yourself, you're actually more likely to attract somebody.
I remember the day my wife found my long box. We weren't married back then. When she found my long boxes, and she's like, "Oh, you don't like comics? This is like a thing."
You're you're a nerd.
Oh yeah, this is not just like, oh, I read them every once in a while. It's just like you have a closet full of these things stacked and organized.
Oh, that's really sweet. But yeah, man, but when you don't, like, when you get to see these things, like you get to watch like history be born and stuff, it's really cool. Like, just to like, oh, I'm there that one moment, because whatever.
Yeah, no, I've never met Joe Hughes. Romita Sr., thank God, is still with us.
Yes.
So someday I'd like to meet him. Someday.
You gotta, man, because he's super cool. I had him sign a trade paperback. I was like, I'm such an idiot, because it's slippery cover. So like his name just keeps every year. It just disappears a little more. I'm like, what am I doing?
If you talk to Adam and Andy, you never know what's going on behind a family. If someone's like, oh, I don't want to talk about my dad, I don't want to live in his shadow. They talk about their father like I want my kids to talk about me. Like that's like they talk about him just like, I mean, it really is like a very much a model for me. Like I hope my kids hold me in regard as they hold their father. Yeah. In terms of just how much love and respect they give him, and it's the nicest thing.
That's really cool. Before we go, is there a character that people would be surprised to hear you really want to write about? Because you've done so, you got to do Batman, so it's like and because of your storied career in Batman, because of your upcoming Batman book, you can pretty much do Batman whenever you want. Like anytime you're like, hey, I got a Batman book, they're like, all right, until you fuck it up, here you go. And you got to do Strange Adventures and Mr. Miracle, more fringe characters. But is there a character you're like, man, you bet you wouldn't believe it, but I got a killer pitch for this guy or gal?
My general philosophy is, and it's served me well, is I don't really care what character I'm working on.
Right.
What I care more is about the editor, the freedom that I'll be allowed to sort of work on the character, in terms of being ambitious and sorts of stuff, and the art team. Like those three things to me come way before the character. Like that's, I mean, if someone's like, Tom, you can work on, who my favorite character was, like Captain America. I love Captain America. Like, you can work on Captain America, but you're going to have an editor who's going to be in your face every single day,
right,
and tell you what to do, and you're gonna
and you have to work with who we pick. Like,
you have to work with who we pick, and it's some guy who doesn't understand anatomy and is just the cool guy of the day. And you'll have no freedom at all in the 6 crossovers. I'll be like, no, that sounds awful to me. I'd rather work with Adam. Like, I feel like the Atom's the most boring character in DC universe. I feel like so that has always been. But yeah, I mean, I famously had I don't know famously, but I had an Aquaman pitch when I was right after I had won like a ton of Eisners for Mr. Miracle, thank God.
Yeah.
I was like, they'll take any pitch, and I have an Aquaman pitch, and I thought it was so fun, and I pitched it to Dan, and I was like, this is gonna be cool. It's gonna be like Mr. Miracle, but with Aquaman. And he was like, that's terrible. I don't want to do it. So apparently I didn't have that much power. So yeah, I do have a secret Aquaman pitch someday if I could
Just
get it
hidden
back.
somewhere. That's going to be like Mr. Miracle.
Fun. Yeah,
that's cool. So final question. Are you doing the best work of your life?
Well, I was in the Beatles.
Something better than Beatles.
Am I doing the best work of my life? What a great question. I mean, yeah, you hope so as a person, but you don't want to be the guy who's wrong. I mean, our industry is lucky in that, like, Stan Lee was 39 when Fantastic Four came out.
Yeah.
Jack Kirby was 53 when he did The Fourth World. And most remarkably, of course, is Will Eisner was in his late 60s when Contract with God came out.
Yeah.
So there is evidence that comic book creators can make great books. And Joe Kubert was the example of all examples, where at the end of his life, when he's drawing Wednesday comics, it still looks cool.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of people don't evolve. His style was, to the day, he was never not Joe Kubert.
That's right.
So I don't think I'm past my prime yet. I mean, I've only been in for 7 years. So
that's what I'm saying. Like, I just did it.
I'm relatively new, but but I ask this question to myself all the time. So you struck a nerve within me. Like,
fair enough.
Do I? But yes, some of the issues I've written recently, like I think Rorschach as a 12-issue series, 'cause it's all done, is the best. I don't know. I mean, it's different than Mr. Miracle. It's not as personal and heart-rendering, but just in terms of me climbing out of my comfort zone, but still accomplishing something, I like my work on it. It's one of those things, like, I don't want to touch it when I get the letters. I was like, Tom, you did this right. So
right.
So we'll see. We'll see.
Good. I mean, the fact is, if you're not done, then no. Right? Because, like, if you're done, then you hope you have done the best work of your life. But if you're not done, you're thinking, like, well, God, I hope not, because what the hell am I keep doing it for? Like, I feel like if you've done it, if you're like, I did it, then there's nothing to aspire towards. Then it's just bucket list stuff. Like, let me see if I can make Speedball cool. Like, it's never going to be like, I don't know. I feel like, right? Like, you want to keep pushing.
Well, but I mean, comic books are, what makes them magical is they're a deadline medium. They're not, there are comic books that are awful that are wonderful, because just these were guys who were just working hard to get it out the door.
Yeah, yeah.
And the fact that they accomplished that amongst all this stuff, and yeah, it's full of shitty, and but you see, like, you can see their time, and you can see their effort, and you can see they were smoking cigarettes all night. I mean, I think of like Bill Everett, right? Like, Bill Everett created the Submariner and contributed to the beginning of the history of comics. And then, like, had a total breakdown, was an alcoholic, but he came back in the last year of his life and drew Submariner. You look at that, it's like the best Submariner, beautiful books, like John Byrne style gorgeousness from a guy who's like totally broke. So, like, but he wasn't trying to make gold then. He wasn't going to recreate the Submariner. He was never going to be that 40s guy again, but he was still creating good work on time. And I think there is, even if it's not your best work, there's still honor and just telling and keep telling stories. I don't know if that makes any sense. But.
Well, it speaks to me, man. So I hope it speaks to other people out there. Ladies and gentlemen, Tom King, not done. So keep it up, man.
Can I promote something really quick?
Yes, no, yeah. How do we? What's up next?
I just want to promote one thing. So I'm going to be on Election Day, 11/3. I'm going to be downtown at Fat Jack's Comic Crypt in downtown Philly, Pennsylvania. It's my only signing of the year. I'm terribly afraid of coronavirus, so you won't see me until I get a goddamn vaccine. But I'm doing this on Election Day because I want people to get out and vote. So if you vote on the honor system, if you voted, show up. I am going to give you a free comic book signed by me. Mm-hmm. I'm going to have hardcovers. I'm going to have Rorschach #1s. I'm going to have Detective 1027s. And I'm going to pre-sign them. So if you don't want to wait in some line because number one, you have to vote. Number two, there's a horrible virus out. Just come pick up a comic and go. Or if you're like, man, I'm super busy that day because I'm voting and working, I'm going to leave a big stack. Come the next day and get a free comic. Just if you're in Philadelphia, if you're in Pennsylvania, go out and vote. And as a thank you to you for voting, I'm giving you a free comic signed by me.
Wow.
Fat Jack's on Election Day.
Fat Jack's on Election Day. Ladies and gentlemen, that is going to be the best deal you've heard all day. So check it out. And of course, follow the man's career. You know what's up.
Yeah, I'm around. You can buy my books.
Exactly. All right. We'll see you guys next week. Thanks a lot.